You don't wake up dreaming of McDonald's fries. You wake up dreaming of McDonald's hash browns. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Your data is like gold to hackers, and they'll sell it to the highest bidder. Are you protected? McAfee helps shield you, blocking suspicious texts, malicious emails, and fraudulent websites. McAfee Secure VPN lets you browse safely, and its AI-powered text scam detector spots threats instantly. You'll also get up to $2 million of award-winning antivirus and identity theft protection, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to Outward, Slate's podcast about queers, talking, laughing, loving, breathing, fighting, fucking, crying, drinking, writing, winning, losing, cheating, kissing, thinking, and dreaming. A little L-word reference there for all you real ones. I'm Bryan Lowder, an editor at Slate, and this week we're going to be talking about a lot of those things, a lot of the things in that list, especially the ones related to relationships and love. Yes, I know it's after Valentine's Day, and yes, I understand that many of us might not have romance at the top of our minds right now as American democracy crumbles around us. At least that's not a turn on for me, but you do you. But for those of us committed to resisting the Trump administration's attacks on trans and queer people, and especially those organizing and working in activist circles, our guest today would argue that strengthening and healing our relationships with other people is essential if we want to have a successful opposition movement. That guest is noted activist and writer Dean Spade, and his new book, with the excellent title Love in a Fucked Up World, offers a roadmap and a toolkit for becoming a better lover, whether that's of friends, comrades, co-conspirators, hookups, or even romantic partners. As Dean underscores in the book, in the face of all this oppression and violence, we're going to need each other more than ever, but the best ways of nurturing those crucial networks of care aren't always obvious. We're going to take a short break, but after that, we'll talk with Dean about self-help for radicals, the insidious romance myth, and something called revolutionary promiscuity. I'm excited about that. But first, listeners, I want to remind you that, we're doing our best here at Outward to cover this frightening and tumultuous time for our community, and we could really use your help. If you have any news stories, social media, like discourses you're following, or pressing questions, or anything else about this movement that you would like to hear us cover, please contact us at outwardpodcast@slate.com. We want to know what's concerning you and what you're thinking about as we all navigate the coming months and years. Again, you can always reach us at outwardpodcast@slate.com. And remember, to keep up with all of Slate's coverage of this challenging time for our community, you can go to slate.com/tag/outward.
Oh, Outward listeners, here's some scoop for you. So what is it, you ask? It's that Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Now, before anyone goes suggesting this is just rumor, know that there's actual proof this kettle of tea is not only piping hot, but 100% true. So yeah, sometimes it pays to be a little nosy, but it always pays to discover. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report. Learn more at discover.com/creditcard.
Every day, thousands of Comcast engineers and technologists, like Kunle, put people at the heart of everything they create.
In the average household, there are dozens of connected devices. Here in the Comcast family, we're building an integrated in-home Wi-Fi solution for millions of families like my own. It brings people together in meaningful ways.
Kunle and his team are building a Wi-Fi experience that connects 1 billion devices every year. Learn more about how Comcast is redefining the future of connectivity at comcastcorporation.com/Wi-Fi.
Oh, sheet.
Honey, chill. It's just laundry.
Not that. I'm talking about these Arm & Hammer Power Sheets. All the power of Arm & Hammer laundry detergent in a convenient tossable sheet.
Oh, sheet.
That's what I'm saying.
And Arm & Hammer Power Sheets deliver an effective clean at a great price. Think of all the laundry we'll do.
And all the money we'll save. Oh, sheet.
Arm & Hammer, more power to you.
All right, we are back. Dean Spade is a writer, activist, and professor at the Seattle University School of Law and has been working to build queer and trans liberation based in racial and economic justice for more than 20 years. He is the author previously of Normal Life, Administrative Violence, Critical Trans Politics, and the Limits of Law, and Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next. In addition to his writing and activism, Dean collaborated with Fireweed Collective to host Dismantling the Romance Myth, a webinar series that examined how dominant relationship narratives shaped by capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy limit our capacity for care. His new book, Love in a Fucked Up World, How to Build Relationships, Hook Up, and Raise Hell Together, is a practical manifesto and toolkit for how to fight these harmful cultural scripts and to take our relationships into our own hands, preparing us for the urgent activism work that is needed today. Dean, welcome to Outward. I'm really delighted you can join us. I think we need what you're selling, especially right now.
So glad to be here and talk with you about this. Is a wild moment to be in this conversation. Yeah.
Just as a way of starting, let's talk a little bit about what motivated you to write a book like this. You write in the intro that the stakes are extremely high. I believe we can and must bring our most radical visionary ideas of liberation into our practices of sex, love, and romance, and to all the relationships in our lives. This implies that, those values maybe weren't evident in those realms as much as you would have liked to have seen them there. So what were you seeing in your circles that pushed you to want to explore and share this message?
My whole life has been about change work for like the last 25 years. I've been in a zillion groups doing different kinds of things on, to stop cops and to stop jails and prisons from being built and to address immigration issues and to directly support trans people in prison and so many things. And it's all collaborative work. Right? All our relationships they're what make up our resistance. It's not individual work. It's all work in groups, all work with others. And what I saw in myself and others over all these years is just like tons and tons of unresolved and really difficult and messy conflict. And that in particular, people kind of act our worst when it comes to sex, love, dating stuff. Like stuff gets kicked up in us, including like big cultural fantasies that make us act really wild, and also like things that get stirred from early life and ideas about the family and experiences in our own families and childhoods that just make people can be like so, diehard, reliable, ethical in other areas. And then you're just like, wow, she did that to her girlfriend. That's how that person acted, but that person didn't want to date them or whatever. And then I've seen so many groups break down and networks break down when people take sides in breakups or, just kind of having really strong emotional reactions that are really understandable in this culture and not having tools for dealing with them in ways that, do less harm and damage. And, as things just mount and get worse, I've been writing this book for 10 years, but things just have gotten worse kind of our whole lives, right? The wealth gap has just expanded our whole lives, prison system, everything. It's all just expanded. The ecological crisis. It's like we need each other so badly. And we need to be able to take concerted action based in trust and do bold moves and like care for people who, whether we like them or not. Like we've got a lot to do that's literally life and death. And so not being able to stick together is like, a real problem. And so, for me, people are like, that's such a departure from your other books that are like these kind of like very political strategy questions about queer and trans resistance and about resistance in general. And to me, this is just exactly the same question. It's like, how does change happen? Well, this is what we need to do to make change more effectively. This is actually one of the biggest threats to our resistance.
One thing I wanted to ask sort of up top before we get into sort of the details of the book is just a question of audience. Is this a book that you envision sort of only for activists, or do you think that people, let's say like a broader socially concerned public, can get something out of it too?
To be honest, I think like it's kind of, it's a self-help book. So like kind of anybody in relationships could get something out of it. And in general, the self-help genre is really like individualizing and depoliticizing.
Right.
So anybody who would rather think about their relationships not as like their personal problem, but like, oh, maybe there's something to do with patriarchy here. Maybe there's something to do with capitalism. Like, I think a lot of people who even have like a somewhat of an interest in understanding those bigger patterns instead of just seeing it as their own will get more satisfaction. I was really excited that there was one reviewer that was like, this is a great book for teens, because it's really hard to write accessibly about nuanced ideas. And I wanted to do that. And I'm happy that some people think that it's true. Like, it's got a lot of charts and bullets and like hoping that people can skim it. People could like screenshot a text of something to their friend and talk about it. I wanted it to be like that. Like you could pull out the part you cared about, you could share it with people.
Yeah.
The kind of personal distress we have often is what generates our desire to like join political movements and change things generally. So moving stuff, for some people, it's one of those pathways. And for others, it might be like, wow, I've been in these movements for decades. It's such a relief to see this described accurately and to see some approaches to it. So I'm hoping it has inroads for different kinds of people.
Yeah. I wanted to, you just brought up sort of the self-help genre. I was curious about how you thought about going into that. Because as you mentioned, you know, your previous work could be seen a little differently, but you are working in this genre that has a kind of a lot of baggage with it. And you mentioned sort of it being individualistic and that kind of thing. Can you just talk about how you approached the conventions maybe of the genre, what you thought was useful for you, what you sort of took from it, and then also maybe what you avoided and didn't want to have in this book?
Yeah, I mean, the truth about it is like I've been reading self-help books since I was like in middle school. I have, and of course, when I was really young, I didn't have a critique while I read them. And I think I experienced some of the harms they can do of like victim blaming. And, you know, I think especially some of the stuff that's like, if you just think positive things will change, and like a lot of things that might be happening in your life might be things you actually cannot change and that are not a result of anything that you're negative thinking, but are a result of political conditions that are taking people you love away from you and causing violence. So, you know, I continued reading self-help books as I grew up because I want to be free. I want to be free. I want us all to be free. And I also personally would like to be free of some of my own struggles that are about internalized cultural nonsense and, you know, effects of trauma. And so I've always used those tools and often had to really read between the lines because a lot of the books feel like they're for middle-aged, upper-class white people. A lot of them are openly homophobic and transphobic. They are anti-poor. They even will describe the distress of people who are struggling in terms that like that those things are signs of like that you're unhealthy. I mean, it's really bad. I remember like once a therapist handed me a book, literally the opening vignette in the book was about this guy who was like so messed up. And the example of it was that he hung out with trans people. I'm not kidding you. And it was like the underclass. He like hung out, you know, et cetera. So obviously I've had to kind of hold my nose, and yet there's been things that have been useful, but I've often been like, I can't really recommend this book to this friend who's in distress because I know this book is super ableist, or I know this book, you know, writes this person's life out, right? Or leans on an idea that the most important relationship in your life is your dating relationship. And that's exactly the opposite of what this person needs right now. I've seen the like deeply, you know, patriarchal, ableist, racist themes in these books, capitalist themes, you know, defining health and success as being like a homeowner, things like that, you know. And I've wanted to be able to kind of draw the things I really liked about it. Like I actually love that self-help books are full of exercises and bullets and charts. I even reference and draw material from classic self-help books like Getting the Love You Want by Harwell Hendricks, Hold Me Tight by Dr. Johnson, all these things. I pick things out of them that I like and I give them a politicized frame that lets us all be in it together and see that the kind of liberation we're looking for is not the liberation to fit into existing systems better. That's not liberation in my opinion, but instead to be aware of what's happening, to notice when we're having strong reactions, to be able to notice that there's a script running in our minds that's not something we wrote, but that we imbibed from family or culture, and to try to become more responsive to reality according to our values instead of being stuck in someone else's script.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those scripts. One of the things you do in this book is address those, break down those myths that we've been sold about romance and relationships sort of all sorts. An example is like, you know, the idea that one person can meet all of our needs, or that love is something we win rather than cultivate. Can you talk about some of the most damaging scripts or misconceptions that you write about, and, you know, what you hope that readers will sort of rethink after encountering this book?
One of them is what you're just referring to, the romance myth, right?
Yeah.
The idea that, you know, romantic love is the most important relationship in your life, that you're a failure if you don't have it or don't want it in that way. It also has inside it like a script, like there's a certain relationship escalator you're supposed to want to like meet and then live together and then get married and have children or whatever it is. It might be somewhat different subculturally for some people, but that there is a script of that. And if you don't want that, or if the other person doesn't want it, then there's something wrong with you, or they don't really love you. So there's a lot of these, it invites a lot of people pressuring each other to do things they don't want to do, which leads people to be in a lot of relationships that are very unpleasant, unhappy, or to feel like you're a bad person if you don't want this, so I should do it. There's also like a whole deep capitalist, like kind of market-based thing, like you got to trade up and get the right person. Like people are kind of these, you know, objects that you're shopping for. And I think in some ways social media and dating apps can really enhance these feelings.
Absolutely.
That like, and we're competing, and then you're like comparing yourself using these like terrible, like fatphobic, ableist, racist beauty norms to be like, am I as good as other people? So we spend a lot of time hating ourselves and feeling undesirable. We also marginalize people who are like cast as undesirable by these terrible norms. We like treat people like very disposably. I think this is like really, really harmful in our communities. Like that kind of trading up, that kind of like, just like really brutal, mean, cruel behavior that's considered acceptable in the area of dating and romance that also I think reflects our messages to ourselves. I mean, that stuff is really painful. In the book, I also talk about like scarcity mentality as a pretty big thing in our culture that, you know, capitalism wants us to have, like believing there's not enough to go around, believing I have to like hoard, believing that I'll be happy if I have like certain things. And of course we know, you know, we've all seen reality TV, rich people are not happy. But like there's a kind of hope that we'll be happy if we just get this and that keeps us on the rat race of, you know, working jobs we hate and like trying to collect and decorate these cages, you know, like it's just like, it's so bad. And also this disposability that goes with it, this kind of, you know, living in a prison-centered society, you know, we're the most imprisoning country that's ever existed on the planet. Yeah. And we throw people, we are afraid of being thrown away. So we're like really like scared and defensive if anyone calls us out on anything. And then we're also we really do dispose of each other. We're like, people really burn bridges and, you know, we live in a society, people move around a lot and just like never see you again or like, you know, break ties really easily. I think even compared to like, you know, many other sort of peer similar countries, the culture of the United States is particularly about burning bridges and throwing people away. Yeah. All of that comes together to make us very insecure and to make our relationships unstable and to make people extremely isolated and lacking like basic care, like someone to visit them in the hospital, someone to take care of them when they're old. Like the level of isolation, you know, more people live alone in the United States than ever have anywhere. There's this kind of like, I don't even want to deal with roommates. I don't like people. It's kind of antisocial norm that like then it's self-fulfilling, right? Because then I don't go to the meeting or the club or the dance or the whatever, the thing that might make me have more people in my life or the reading group, and the kind of actually like social anxiety that can mount from lack of practice. A lot of my students talk to me about this. And so all of that then leads you more likely, if you are in a love relationship, to be stuck in a, people call it community of two. Like,
yeah, because you've grabbed so strongly onto that as your
and that's all you have. Yeah. All of that leads to the fact that we have these incredibly skyrocketed rates of domestic violence. Yeah. You know, at least 30% of all relationships, queer or straight, have domestic violence in them. So if you don't have close friends to talk to about like, hey, this seems things are going a little funny. And if you're in a society where people go to Love Island, you know, we meet, I fall in love with you and I totally ditch my friends, the likelihood that we'll be on actually a really high stakes, dangerous path. Like the person most likely to kill me is my lover. Like that's, this book is like, tries to be light and fun about sex and romance, but there's actually something very, very painful and high stakes underneath it that most of us, you know, have seen personally and can relate to.
Yeah. No, I mean, one of the things that your book made me realize was how lonely, I mean, you used that word, I think, a minute ago, but lonely these cultural scripts can make us feel, these sort of paradigms that we're living in. It also leads you to feel like that whatever problem you're having in your relationship or friendship or whatever kind it is like only your fault or yours to fix alone, or like no one else has ever dealt with it before or whatever. And I think this is where your book comes in, right? But can you talk a little bit about how we can overcome that kind of thinking and maybe reconnect with broader community?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I hope happens the most is that people talk to their friends about the book. Yeah. Or that they read it in a reading group, or that they sit down and just look at the chart together, you know, just look at one page together. There's also a thing where people will be in a love relationship and not tell anybody what's happening. That's very common, right? That's actually kind of the model. I mean, what's interesting, I think, about queers is that we have more friendship than straight people have. And that's because the straight romance narrative is basically you're in your natal family, and then maybe you have some friends during adolescence. You get your husband or whatever, and you go into a new natal family, and friendship is like this adolescent thing. So in some ways, it's the least colonized part of our relationship. It's like the most consent happens there. Like you actually might give a friend feedback. I feel like I've changed the most from things friends have told me about myself. Most people, if they're having a less hierarchical relationship, it's in a friendship. It's not that never happens in friendships. People do abuse each other in friendships, but like it's an interesting space, right? And so my hope is like, can we all have more of that? I think we all desperately need more of that. Can we all also get braver in those friendships about sharing what's happening emotionally for us? So I'm hoping people will do that. And also in the book, I talk really explicitly, like, I think if people are feeling isolated, they should join the movement. Like, honestly, it's like the best relationships I've ever had. It all happened there. And they're with people often who are not like me. Like, I become friends with someone who's a really different age than me, or we're not from the same subcultures, because it's so powerful to connect with someone because you share like a passion for like liberation or stopping suffering. And then you do stuff together that's kind of hard and interesting, where it's like, it's not like you're just consuming music together or something. It's like you're doing something, like you're trying to figure out how to support people in this encampment, or you're trying to sort out how to like message this thing and you're going to go wheat paste it, or like you're doing these things that are creative and that you get to like talk about cool stuff you heard other people did. And then you like try something and you're like, oh wow, what do we not like about that? You get to be honest and give feedback. Like it's a space where we can produce really deep support. And there's so many people I've met in movement groups where I'm like, I don't really like her, but I mean, I'm going to show up for her if she goes to the hospital or if the cops go, you know, like, it's like, there's also, you meet all these people who you form trust with, whether or not they're your number one. And you also meet people to have sex with and, you know, like all of it, right?
Sure.
But like, I think it's such a deep place. And also we just need our movements to get a lot bigger because of what we're up against. So we also need to make our movement spaces, if you're starting a group, really friendly and really welcoming. People don't need to know it all before they get there. And like, because we need to make this a good space to come into. People are like, oh, I can find some belonging here. I can find some connection, some safety. Like, I'm going to find someone to flirt with. I'm going to find somebody to talk to about this thing that happened to me that I've never told anyone, or to share this passion I have for how unjust something is. Like, these are very good ways to build relationships. So that is my hope about the loneliness piece as well, is that people will see resistance as the place to work on having fun.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, yeah, I feel like, you know, the typical advice about how to make friends, especially in adulthood, like in your 30s and whenever it kind of gets harder, is right to join a book club or whatever. But like, this is such a better way of doing that. Join the movement, join whatever that looks like in your particular community. I think that's a great place to take a break. We'll do that now, and we'll be back with more from Dean Spade right after that.
When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the US. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP works wonders.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality bikes, which might lead to another discovery. Getting back on the saddle isn't always comfortable. Good news is Sierra has massage guns. And chafe wipes, too. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
All right, we're back. Dean, in this part of the interview, I wanted to maybe dig in a little more to the sort of practical advice, some of the tools and things that you offer in the book, because I think they're really interesting. Maybe one place to start is, you know, a lot of people will only recognize that they had unhealthy patterns in a relationship in hindsight. Like, it's sort of, you see it from that point of view. What are some early warning signs that you could give our listeners that they're being maybe pulled into a kind of a structure or cycle that is not aligned with maybe with their values or what they actually want?
Yeah, I love this question. No one's asked me this. It's so fun having a new book out and getting all these questions you've never been asked. So, I mean, one thing I think in the book, I talk about something called the romance cycle, which is like how when we first meet people, and this could be like a friend or it's very, very clear often with like lovers or dates, but it also can happen even with a group. You first encounter and you're like, this is amazing. Oh my God. And you kind of project really positively. You're like, you only see the good stuff. You kind of selectively don't see the bad stuff. And then at some point, usually there's a feeling like, I really have this person, like we really landed it, or I'm really part of this group or whatever. And during the projection, part of what's happening is we're imagining that needs we've never gotten met will be met. It's unconscious. So I'm like literally projecting on this, you know, new date. Like I'm like, you know, he's going to love me in some way that, you know, my parents didn't. Is basically the vibe that is, you know, kind of often underneath it. But it could be this group where other people get this about me. I'm not going to be the only trans person here. I'm not gonna, whatever it is, you know. And then inevitably there'll be some kind of disappointment. People can't possibly meet that, especially since I was selectively only seeing the best stuff. And also it's with dating and stuff, you know, usually I'm also showing the best stuff, right? Like I'm like making you the most elaborate meal. I really cleaned the house, had the most elaborate sex. And then at some point when we trust each other enough, I might be like, I don't do all of that for you. It's not bad or misleading. It's just a cycle, right? And then so the next part of the cycle is that we experience some disappointment. And that's when, you know, relationships get into conflicts. Like, oh my God, this could be with a best friend or with a group or whatever. But it's like, it can feel proportionally disappointing. So it was kind of blown up on the one side. Now it's blown up in the other direction. And for me, the thing about noticing early signs is just to be like, oh, I'm in the romance cycle. It's not a bad thing,
right?
But there's some things I could avoid. Like one thing people do when they're in the beginning of the romance cycle is they ditch everything else. And so like the number one thing we can all do to like stick to our values and not get into a dangerous or messed up situation is to stay connected to the rest of our lives. A lot of people will like move far away with the new lover.
Yeah.
They'll drop their own political beliefs, or they'll join whatever the lover does, or the two of them will just stop hanging out with anybody but each other. All of that is really, really hard on us. And then when the disappointment period comes, it can turn into a very toxic relationship. So that's one thing I would look for. Another thing I look for is exclusivity. I think it's very easy to want with a best friend or a lover, like to have, this is special because we only do this and this together. And what we actually want in all of our lives is a promiscuous support system. So, if you and I are best friends and we go, once a year to the Ferris wheel, and then I take someone else to the Ferris wheel, it's gotta be okay. It's like, it doesn't mean it's not special when we do it. Or like if, I think a lot of us have just one person, maybe, or none, but one person we share this hard thing that's happening with caring for our elder, or this hard thing in our love relationship or whatever, or we only share things with our boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it is. So how to make sure you got a lot of people to share stuff with and that you don't mistake exclusivity for specialness or connection. And this is really important right now because I'm sure you've noticed, like, people are not doing well. People are super, super not doing well. So we're going to need more friends, because that might be that, like, I'm going through a breakup and I need support. And the first 5 friends I call, they acted weird, or they didn't call me back, or they're in the emergency room with whatever, or they're dealing with their own deportation case. I mean, so it's like, we all need to have a lot of options of who to call with stuff. So that means we need to all open up to people a little more when we meet them. Like, we need to start those trusting relationships. Like, maybe look at whether or not we have a hard time opening up with folks and be like, what could help? What would it be like to have a friend who I did this with? Like, how would I get there? Would I read a self-help book with a friend? Or would I what could I do? How do I find do I want to join a support group for other people who've been through what I've been through? Would that help me find a friend who I could trust with this really heavy thing? Or a 12-step program, or like whatever. Like, how do I get into adult spaces where people are a little bit more emotionally vulnerable? Because a lot of people aren't in any, except for maybe their love relationship, if they're doing that. Yeah. For me, all of this stuff, the early warning signs, the early warning signs might be things for me like, oh, I'm noticing jealousy, I'm noticing exclusivity, or I'm noticing a lot of insecurity with this lover. I'm really freaked out if they don't text me back for an hour. But those things aren't bad. Those are just experiences. And so it's just like, okay, when I have those experiences, what kind of support do I have around me? Who could I talk to? Sometimes it shouldn't be only your lover that you talk to about your relationship. Yeah. You might need, advice from someone else. So I think a lot of it is just about like, nothing about the feelings we're having are bad. If I start to act on some of those feelings, if I'm telling somebody else that they shouldn't have friends, or if I'm trying to stop someone else from pursuing their well-being, that's really concerning. And that, those values are in the book. Like, it's like relationships should be supporting each other to thrive, even if that means that you change. You will change the whole time I'm relating with you. I will change. And that could mean changes that are scary. Like, you want to go to graduate school somewhere else, or you want to start hanging out with a lot of people, or you want to have sex with people besides me, or whatever. Yeah. Like, the fundamental principle that I want you to be well and fully develop your life and your politics and your identities and your sexuality, like, has to be the baseline. And it's okay that sometimes I don't feel that way. I'm like, oh my God, if that person does that, then they'll leave me. That feeling is fine. And then what's the support system for that feeling? Yeah. So it's like not about judging ourselves for not already being these like perfect people who never feel threatened or scared. It's about, or angry or controlling or whatever, obsessive. It's just about like finding a way to navigate those feelings in a loving way and knowing they're happening. A lot of times we don't know they're happening. We're just acting wild. We don't even know what's motivating it. So a lot of the book is just about basic emotional awareness.
Yeah. I love your use of the term promiscuity to sort of capture some of this. I think that makes it feel sexy, right? It makes that work, especially for people like, I am someone who I've been in a long-term triad relationship, and I'm sort of a homebody. And so I have to really work to be sure that I'm connecting with my friends and keeping up these sort of larger networks that you're talking about, because I'm very happy to just kind of be at home with those two people. But you're totally right. I mean, this was a good push for me reading this and talking to you about that, because it's important. It's just very important to have that much broader network to sort of help us handle all of these things. One of the things that you necessarily explore in the book, of course, and you mentioned this, is sort of conflict, interpersonal conflict. And you share a tool that I was actually sort of familiar with from therapy, but I really love it. So I wanted you to sort of share it with our listeners here. I think you call it the "What Else Is True" exercise. Can you explain it, and then maybe tell us like a story, sort of maybe from your life or someone else's, where that has been useful and clarifying for you?
What else is true is, question I find really useful. And the way that I set it up in the book is like, there's an image of a small circle with a bigger circle around it. And the small circle, you write the strong feeling you're having. So you use this when you're just like, I am having, basically I feel like we get like tunnel vision. It's like, the example I'll use is like, I'm in a group and I feel like this person like undermined me in the meeting and they're so terrible and I hate them. And, you know, and I've got this whole story going. Maybe it's about how bad I am and everyone else is going to hate me and kick me out of the group. Or it's usually how bad I am or how bad they are or both, right? It's like the end of the world and it's like keeping me up at night. So when you've got something like that going on and you're like, I can't stop thinking about this. My world has been reduced to this tiny little circle. So you put that in the small circle. I hate Cindy. You know, Cindy's going to ruin my life. Whatever the story is right then.
Come on, Cindy.
And then, then you do a couple exercises. The first one is that in the outer circle, you write, what else is true about Cindy? Cindy's in this group. We both care about unhoused people getting what they need. Cindy was kind to me when my cat died. Cindy is going through a breakup. Whatever, some other stuff that I know about Cindy that might just already, I'm starting to open the aperture a little bit of like, Cindy's not just like enemy number one.
Yeah.
Then in the next one, use another little circle and a big circle. I write again that I hate Cindy is in the small circle. And then I write, what do I not know? I don't know whether Cindy disagreed with my proposal because something that I'm not aware of. I don't know whether Cindy's cat died that day. I don't know whether Cindy's tone was because of something that has nothing to do with me or the meeting.
Right.
Like, just like remembering that, like, there's always more, especially with like a text or an email. You have no idea what's going on. Or if you went to a party and someone acted weird to you or didn't call you back, like anything could be happening. So what do I not know? Or it looked like those two were whispering about me, but they could have whispered about anything, you know, whatever, right? So just remembering that I might be having like kind of a paranoid read on this or whatever.
Yeah.
And the third one is like, again, in a little circle, I write, I hate Cindy, my life is over, whatever. And then a big circle, I write, you know, what else is true about me? I've got all these other friends in the group who really care, and none of them acted weird about the proposal. Or I'm in this other group too that I really care about, or I'm reading a book I really like, or I'm looking forward to, you know, going away for the weekend, like whatever, like just like get your life back. Like you have other people and things. Cindy is not everything, right? Like that, it's like getting that context, which I think especially in love relationships, it's real hard. Like it can just be like, oh my God, he didn't text me. It's very hard to remember that like, I've had a zillion boyfriends. There's been I have so many friends, or I have so many other things I care about right now, or even just like, I know this person cares for me. Any of it, right? We've had conflicts and gotten over them before. I've had conflicts with somebody in my life and gotten over them before, whatever. That is the main part. And then after that, there's a little part of the exercise where you write down on the left side of the chart, things that I actually can control and take action on. And on the right side, things that I can't. You know, so on the left side, like, I can ask Cindy if we could talk about the proposal on the phone sometime. I could, you know, like, what if I could take a bath and try to relax my body a little bit? I could distract myself with a novel. Like, what are the things I can do right now to feel better? And the right side, stuff I can't do. I can't change how Cindy thinks. I can't control whether the group takes the proposal or not. And then some people will just rip that in half and just burn or throw away the side they can't control. Just symbolically letting go of what I can't control. And then there's some questions at the end about sort of like asking yourself, like, is this bringing up another time in my life? Like, do I feel like I felt in my family? Cindy's being like my alcoholic mom, or Cindy's being like my sister, or do I, you know, what's familiar here? Is there anything that's making me more reactive because I was in this role before in another group, I lost my job and it was just like this, or I was in this role in my family or somewhere else, just to know, like, so then you can care for the part of you that's actually having a flashback and be like, actually, this might not be so much about Cindy. And then be like, you know what, I'm going to make my favorite meal from when I was 13 and this same thing happened. Or I'm going to do something that like honors the part of me
and
that
attend to that part. Yeah.
That didn't get cared for, that was alone, or that learned it had to control stuff or whatever. Like, I'm just going to like be like, when we have a strong feeling, not being like, I wish I wasn't having this, I'm bad, or my feeling is right and they're bad, but instead just like, oh, I'm having a strong feeling. That's real. What else is going on? And how can I be nice to myself while I'm in a strong feeling? Like, wow, yeah, that happens. And what would a kind friend say to me while having that strong feeling? Can I do any of that?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I think that's so powerful, especially for people that are prone to anxiety in relationships. My gosh, like it can really reframe everything. So yeah, I hope our listeners took notes on that one, or they can pick up the book and see it.
And I have to say, it's not like this makes you feel 100% better, right? None of this. No, but the thing is, it's like you get a little space. My friend Dory once said to me, if you're really in like a terrible feeling, ask for 2% relief. Like just like, please God, give me 2 or whatever you know. And it works, right? 2%. That is actually a very empowering feeling. Whereas if you think the standard is I have to feel great all the time, then you're going to feel judgmental of yourself. But if you're just like, can I get a little room in here? Yeah. Here's a way to get some room. Okay, you know.
As a way of kind of wrapping up, you write that our romantic lives are not just some private thing that we are failing or succeeding at. I love that idea. It's not privatized. It's something that's happening in concert with other people, right? Can you leave us sort of with a big picture takeaway about why you think doing love and relationships better and working on them actively sort of in community this way is going to be so necessary as we continue into this second Trump administration and all of the shit that is coming our way from that? What is the power of doing that work now in that context specifically?
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, things are incredibly dire and they're going to get more dire.
Yeah.
So it's like we have the Trump administration that's ongoing for at least 4 years, and we don't know how long that will actually go on for.
Yeah.
And then we also have this like wild ecological crisis that's causing like disasters in every community. We have just like a ramping up of everything dangerous for our families and communities and people around us, right? Like just loss of healthcare, increase of policing and criminalization, like, increase of immigration enforcement. So we have to do a lot of really risky stuff to take care of each other. We have to hide people from ICE and the cops. We have to, make our own medicines and abortions and distribute them. We have to we have to do so much scary stuff together under really hard conditions. We really need to be able to work together. People need to be able to do clandestine stuff. People need to be able to, at their job, figure out how to, on their break, get this thing for somebody who's not supposed to get it. If you're a social worker or a nurse or a teacher. I mean, all this stuff, we have to trust each other. And we have to get a lot of people to be brave and, take part in political work who haven't, because we're very demobilized. The society is very disempowering, right? So it's huge. And right now, after being in these movements for 25 years, I can tell you the thing that gets in the way of our work is that we treat each other poorly, don't know how to have conflict. This is it. This is the thing. Our opponents have all the money and the guns. The only thing we have is all the people on earth. And if we can't move together, we can't beat them. But if we could, we could, right? Literally, we could stop the evictions. We could stop the arrests. There's more of us than there are of them. But they have the kind of concentrated forms of power, the centralized forms of power. So we have to get together. That is it. And when we try to, we treat each other poorly. And a lot of that happens way more than we'd like to admit, because we have imbibed this romance myth stuff and we're acting out. I'm in the group with you and I think you're my dad or whatever. And, so basic emotional awareness and being able to care for each other and back each other up. And also we're all grieving so much, and we're going to be grieving so much more because there's so much loss coming no matter how we move.
And we're still not over COVID, right? I mean,
no, we're still, and we're all living with long COVID out here. I mean, we are in such worse conditions than we were the first time that Trump was elected. Rents are higher, more people are in housing. I mean, everything is really dangerous. So we have to get a kind of emotional capacity and a kind of relational capacity to care for each other, not treat each other badly, not ditch each other all the time, and actually do stuff together. That's hard, which will mean if you do stuff that's hard together that you care about, you will have conflict. And that's okay. We have to totally change the idea that it's not okay to have conflict. So to me, this skill set is life and death. And it's kind of funny because we live in a culture that's romance and love and, self-help books, that's girl stuff, right? That's very typical. But feminists have always told us the personal is political. How you do anything is how you do everything. So if I boss my boyfriend around at home, I'm probably going to be acting that way also at the group where we're trying to figure out how to support unhoused people in encampment. And I'm probably also getting bossed around at my job and being treated badly. And if none of us have any skills for how to collaborate together and deal with things other than that, it's all going to keep falling apart very shortly after we started out. So that's why I think these skills are so essential right now.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I think our listeners will too. Folks, if you haven't gotten the book yet, it's been out since January, I think. But if you haven't gotten it yet, the title again is Love in a Fucked Up World, How to Build Relationships, Hook Up, and Raise Hell Together. Dean, where else can people follow you or find your work?
Yeah, I'm on social media, pretty easy to find. I also have a website that's deanspade.net where there's just a lot of videos and I just love to make multimedia stuff with artists. And so there's fun stuff there. I think there's also some stuff on YouTube, but yeah, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, all of it.
Awesome.
It's not called Twitter anymore, X.
Yeah, whatever that is now. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, Dean, thanks again for being on Outward. This was a really excellent conversation. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for reading.
Okay, that is it for the main show today, but there's always more Outward over in the Slate Plus feed. This week, Dean Spade will stick around to help us update the gay agenda. If you're not already a subscriber, remember that by joining Slate Plus, you'll get ad-free podcasts, extra segments on all of our shows, and you will never hit a paywall on the Slate site. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of the Outward show page, or you can visit slate.com/outwardplus to get access wherever you listen. As always, please send us feedback and topic ideas at outwardpodcast@slate.com. Our show is produced by the radically lovable Palace Shaw. If you like Outward, please subscribe in your podcast app. Tell everyone in your life about it. Friends, lovers, all of the people in that network of care. Tell them about it, please. And have them rate and review the show so that others can join and we can grow even bigger. Until next week, stay gay, everybody.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.